Hello, everybody. Now it's time for chapter 4 in our story about John G. Lake, and the chapter is called Growing in the Healing Ministry. People were amazed when they saw that Jenny was well. News of the healing traveled all over the country. Before long, sick people started to come to John's home, asking him to pray for them. Other people sent requests to him, asking him to pray for their healing. God had started this ministry by healing John's family. John knew he really needed God's help. One day, as John sat in a meeting, he listened to the preacher speaking. You need to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. God gives you His power when you are baptized in His Spirit. John knelt down. God, baptize me with your Holy Spirit. As he prayed, John felt God's presence come upon him, and he suddenly became aware of God's power in a totally new way. Just like the sea waves wash onto the beach, John felt the waves of God's power washing onto him. John started to get really busy. Now he was running his business, looking after his family, and now lots of sick people came to him asking for prayers as well. One day, John went to visit a man who had a high temperature and a sore on his skin that was the size of a dinner plate. John put his hand on the wound and he prayed for God to take it away. Before long, John received a message from the man. 1 hour after you left me, I could see the print of your hand burned into the wound. Your handprint was about 1/2 centimeter deep. John realized that God had given him a gift of healing. Now he wanted to learn more about it. So he left his newspaper business and he moved to a city that Mr. Dowie had built called Zion. Mr. Dowie asked John to look after all of his buildings. In the daytime, John looked after buildings. In the evenings, John was out preaching to people. His studies on healing had to be fitted in around everything else. One day, John went to a meeting in his friend's house. That night, there was another man, and he was preaching. He was called Tom Hesmahawk. Tom was older than John. He had a mustache, and his hair was graying. As he was teaching, John noticed an authority in his preaching. The Holy Spirit was clearly in Tom's life. At the end of the meeting, Tom came up to John, and he told him bluntly, as I was preaching, Jesus told me that you and we are going to preach together. John found it funny at first. They had only just met. Tom was far more experienced in the ministry. A few days later, God spoke to John in prayer, and John realized in his spirit that Tom was right. This was what God wanted them to do, to preach together. So Tom and John, they became best of friends, working together and preaching together many times. John carried on his work in Zion until he became concerned about some of the things Mr. Dowie was doing. It seemed that Mr. Dowie had problems with money. But another thing that was more serious was that Mr. Dowie was starting to move away from the teaching in the Bible. He was not focusing on Jesus anymore, and he loved to be praised himself. So it was time for John to leave the city of Zion. In 1904, John moved with his family to a city called Chicago. When he got there, John paid to be a part of the Chicago Board of Trade. This was like a large organization where all the top businessmen did business with each other. And John got to know a lot of people, and soon he was making a lot of money. Within 1 year, he had become extremely rich. He was so good at making money that some businessmen asked John to run the 3 of the biggest insurance companies in the whole country. John was one of the top businessmen in Chicago. People would come to him and pay him to give them advice. It seemed that no matter what he did, money came pouring into his pocket. But John was not trying to make money. In fact, John only wanted to serve God more. So during all this time, John also continued to grow closer to Jesus and to grow with God. God continued to work in John to prepare him for his calling.
A little boy of 13 was on his way to school. He heard a crowd of people laughing and he went to take a look. Thousands were listening to the stories of one man. He spoke with such wisdom, even the kids could understand. The hours passed so quickly, the day turned into night. Everyone was hungry, but there was no food in sight. The boy looked in his lunchbox at the little that he had. He wasn't sure what good it'd do. There were thousands to be fed, but he saw the twinkling eyes of Jesus, the kindness in his smile, and the boy cried out with the trust of a child. He said, "Take my 5 loaves and 2 fishes, do with it as you will." my 5 loaves and 2 fishes